So, welcome all. We are comfortable in the chairs. Nice. It's a big honor to have this talk with you, surrounded by four female coaches. So, I can't wait to start the conversation. So, let's go. Starting with you, Esther. You started playing drafts at the age of 11 yourself. That's what we said in the introduction as well. And after that, you turned into a coaching role. What is the reason that you started as a coach? Was it a specific goal for you to become a coach?
I think it came quite natural actually. After my secondary school, I did some study educational sciences, and yeah, it came quite naturally to become, after youth player, to become coach at European and World Championships. And I was already training at club level, as a trainer, and then it continued into from 2020 I started as professional coach.
Yeah, nice. So being an athlete yourself first and then turning into coach, how did you interpret the knowledge that you had as an athlete into your coaching skills?
Yeah, that's a nice one. I think I use quite a lot of my own experiences. So I think coaching can be a bit like a puzzle. So when you're coaching children, then you're searching for points for them to grow. And then I use my own knowledge, of course. So I experienced a lot of problems as a player, and that's maybe why I can see the problems with for the players as well, the mental issues maybe. I use my own experience.
So practice experience is really good to have as a coach.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And what about you, Irene? Because in the introduction, I said 72-time international, so there's a lot of experience there as well as an athlete. How do you put your skills into play?
Well, when I was listening to Esther, this is how I started as well as a young coach to practice and teach the kids from my own experience, what I learned. But later on, I developed myself as a coach. I think that the situation is so different. So my experiences aren't the ones my players have, and I don't want them to have the same experience because they're all different individually. They have to be coached individually because they're different people. So I think the greatest thing I learned is that I can relate, but I cannot compare their situation right now to mine.
Is that something that you noticed immediately when you started as a coach, or that you have to learn out of experience?
Yeah, I learned that over the years. In the beginning, I was really tough on the way I had it in mind, and the last 5 years, I think, I really developed myself more and more. Hanging on top of the situation and have an overview and really looking individually what they need instead of what they need as always as a group, or what I think is best for them.
Okay. Then looking more to the right, because there we have two people who have more science-based background. How did you use this science background in your daily coaching skills, for example, Ruth?
Yeah, I think they've always gone hand in hand for me. So, growing up, I played, and then I kind of started to coach without really knowing what I was doing, if that makes sense. So then, as I've kind of gone through university, I think it's always merged really nicely. So, the understanding of, actually just the underlying principles of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, rather than just doing something because I've seen a nice practice design on YouTube. I actually have a much better understanding of the players in terms of their needs and their backgrounds, and whether that's the physical maturation, or whether that's the kind of social, psychosocial bits, or whether that's more about practice designing and what I'm actually trying to achieve as a coach. So for me, you know, they've always really gone hand in hand in terms of who I am as a coach and who I am as a researcher. It's just kind of one and the same thing. I'm just prioritizing one thing during the day, and then I'm actually going out and doing it in the evening with the kids on the pitch.
Yeah, and can you pick out one specific skill that you took out from, for example, a study or something out of your science background?
I think for me, so it would be around. It's tough to pick out one.
That's why I asked the question.
I think for me it would be around understanding young players. So again, I can't really attribute this to one study because, you know, there's so many things out there that I've kind of read and engaged in. But it's understanding actually, you know, young people not being mini adults as we know very well. And I think in terms of, you know, the physical and the social. So actually for me, how I currently coach under 11 boys. So how I interact with them on a personal level, how I talk to them, really thinking about the language that I use, because I came from adult football and it was very, you know, technical, tactical knowledge that as a 32-year-old I understand, but what does an 11-year-old understand? Do I understand them as a young person in terms of their, you know, growth and maturity, and they're going through growth spurts, so I'm understanding their, you know, lack of coordination all of a sudden. So for me it would be the biggest thing that's probably impacted my coaching is actually understanding the kids in front of me as kids.
Yeah, nice. How's that for you, Irene?
Regarding the first question?
Yes, regarding the first question.
I think that, as Ruth says, it goes hand in hand. And I think that having more knowledge about the scientific parts, about talent development, about sport pedagogy, I think it gave me a more balanced view on how to look to the kids. And the practice actually did that as well, because there's no clear road for the kid how to develop. Kids develop not similar. There's no like average kid. So trying to make tailor-made approaches for kids and see what is actually possible. I think that's really something that I like about having the scientific knowledge, but also the practical knowledge. So how is it actually in practice, and trying to go, it's a sort of interactive process, constantly going on, like gaining more knowledge, but also seeing how it works out, and then you see, okay, that's how we thought in theory how it works, is not how it always works in practice, and the other way around. So yeah, I think that's more like a nuanced, balanced approach that really helped me. Yeah.
So we really need a balance in practice and also in science background in theory.
Yeah, how do I balance that?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of naturally flow. The thing is that you stay open-minded for what is happening in practice, and don't think that science gives you all the answers, but practice doesn't either. So I think if you're open-minded for both views and try to connect them all the time, I think that for me that's really helpful. Because then you still trying to get the better development for the kids and the optimal situation, which probably we never reach, but try at least to get to that point.
Yeah. So it's nice to see that we take skills out of experience and out of theory and science into our coaching. And talking about skills and competences that you have to have as a coach, out of my experience, when I was awarded in 2019 as Coach of the Year, that award made me think, like, what makes me a good coach? Am I a good coach? And I wanted to ask to you all, what makes a good coach? What are the competences that we need to be a good coach? Who's first?
Well, I think one of the most important things, I think, is seeing the human being behind the athlete, or behind the kid that's coming into for playing during one of your projects. So I think that's the most important thing, because they're approached as athletes every day, but they're human beings, and I think when you truly see that, that's one major thing of being a good coach, I think.
Maybe also connected to that, being patient. Sometimes as a coach you can see a lot of opportunities to improve for a player, but you also have to see whether the player is ready to improve. And sometimes I experience that I'm a bit impatient, so I want to do a lot of things together, and then if the player isn't ready for it, it doesn't work.
Something more to add from Ruth and Irene?
Yeah, it's probably relatively similar a little bit, but the word that always springs to my mind is like relationships. Like coaching is always about the relationship between the coach and the athlete, whether it's an individual athlete or a team. You know, it's about those relationships. And I think when I was a younger coach, I used to focus really on the game of football. I used to, you know, how do I focus on passing? How do they shoot? How do they link up and connect and combine? And actually now I'm trying to flip that and go, actually, how do I build this relationship with this young person or whoever I'm working with first? How do I build that relationship? Because until I have that relationship, it doesn't matter what I have to say about football, because, you know, I can't help them with it unless I know them, if that makes sense. So it's probably quite similar, but the word relationships is kind of what I would go with.
I actually can only echo these words, like what they mean. And maybe in addition to that, I think that reflection, looking in the mirror and see what you actually are doing as a coach, how that impacts the kids, and looking back like, okay, did I went the right direction, or do I need to change something? And looking back to what is your position in it, and are you really doing the things that are the most optimal for the kids? Or is it your own agenda maybe, or your aims, your personal aims? And I think that actually it should always be the first. You're trying to do what's best for the kids. Looking in the mirror is a part of that.
And maybe in addition to that, a lot of times we're looking at winning tournaments, winning medals, winning championships, but like we're sitting right here, we do a lot of work in the shadow. So nobody will see that in a newspaper tomorrow, what we are doing today. So I think it's also important that what we're all telling you today, it's not about winning the prizes, and to keep that in mind, and this is the things that are making it worthwhile. So adding value to the work you do every day in the relationship with the players, and in seeing the player on the court every day, working hard. I think, adding value to that is something that's very important, I think, because tomorrow we don't win that medal during training camp.
Diving a little bit more into coach skills for kids, because I think coaching kids is way different than coaching adults. Ruth, can you tell us something about what the biggest differences are, and what really stands out for you there?
I think, like you say, I always think the sport remains largely the same. You know, football is football. Okay, it's different numbers on the pitch and
technical skills.
Technical skills are definitely different. But I think for me, again, and I feel like I'm a broken record here, just saying the same thing over and over. But it is about, as an adult, we've got a very specific view of the world and how things should work and how we react to certain things. Kids don't have that same worldview, whether that's, you know, views on what's appropriate to say and when and how they behave and how they stand in a line and whatever else. So I think that's probably the biggest difference for me, is actually just trying to get my head around what does this kid's worldview look like, whether that's in terms of, the language that I use or how I break things down, and how I break things down verbally to them in terms of explaining. And one of the things that I'm really working on at the minute is, if something isn't working, if I've set up a practice and it's not working, I would traditionally get really frustrated with the participants, because it's like, well, how do you not get this? Like, it's really obvious, it's clear. I've drawn it on a whiteboard, I've explained it 3 times, and actually starting to look at myself and going, okay, like, how can I do better for these kids, if that makes sense? So I think, that's the biggest difference, and maybe just one example of the sport is similar. It's bigger or smaller, and there's different technical abilities, but the way in which you interact with people is completely different. And even within the team, I've got 11 kids in my team. I have to understand what pushes each one of their buttons, and I know that verbally explaining over here is going to work, but over there it's not going to work. So yeah, that for me would be the biggest difference between kind of adults and kids.
Yeah. Esther, you are a talent coach at the moment. What kind of skills do you bring in there towards these talents?
Yeah, obviously the draft skills, but I think also kind of mindset about how do you continue after losing a game or after winning a game. And I think especially kids are quite open to learn these kind of mindset, and that's very important in their growing onto adulthood. Because if they don't learn this at a young age, then I think it's more difficult for them to learn it when they're older. So I think that's very important for a talent coach to teach them.
Yeah. Okay. We see a big number in differences in quantity if we look into female coaches and compared to men coaches. We already saw that, of course, in the first presentation of the day. Yeah, what do you think is the specific reason for this, Ruth? Is there one, or as you said, there are, I think, many?
I think there's many. I think coming from a football background, speaking very specifically about that context, football in the UK has always been and still is a male-dominated sport. From everywhere, players from a grassroots level, players at an adult level, referees, coaches, and I think a lot of it stems from that in terms of stereotypically, as kids, and this is where parental support comes into it. You see a lot of parents. They are the ones that kind of decide what their kids do. So if you're not playing football at a young age, you're probably not going to go into coaching. If you're doing whatever else instead, rugby or dance or drafts or table tennis, you're going to go into that. So if, as a 4 or 5-year-old, your parents are taking you to one thing but not football, that's going to have a very real impact 10, 15, 20 years down the line when those age groups are going into coaching. I think
so a real culture thing, is that?
Say that again, sorry.
A real culture thing then.
Yeah,
the sport.
definitely. Yeah. I think speaking from a very specific football UK context, I do think that is positively changing. So, I look at the success on the pitch of the kind of women's national team and the amount of publicity that they're getting now and the trickle-down effect that has. And I know there's a lot of fantastic kind of real on-the-ground, on-the-grass programs to support more girls into playing, which will have a knock-on effect in terms of coaching further down the line. I think the other thing as well is when I was kind of 16, 17, I didn't really see myself as going into coaching because I had never seen a female football coach. They just, in my world, they didn't exist. So, getting more and more women into coaching, even though right now the numbers are pretty low comparatively, so I work in kind of the boys' talent development environment. There's probably, there's 92 clubs in the country that do it, and there's probably 10, 15 female coaches in there. Yeah. But even though that's 10, 15, that's not a big number, that's probably 10 or 15 more than there was 5 years ago. So again, if you look at it that way and actually, okay, what positive impact can we have, and other female coaches around the country, whether they're grassroots or adult football, whatever it is, I think it's kind of a bottom-down and a top-down shift, if that makes sense. So more kids playing it, more girls playing it, but then also more women being visible in whatever context they're visible in. And that doesn't have to be on TV, just down at the park on a Saturday morning. Yeah. More kids, because I think that's the generation we need to impact. More kids will just see it as normal.
Yeah. And Irene, during the presentation, you already talked about these barriers. How can we take them away?
I think first is to identify the barriers. Mm-hmm. Like what kind of barriers do actually exist in a certain context, because that can completely differ between a female coach is working in a big city or her personal situation, etc. And also depending on what kind of sport you are actually in, because I know that there are some sports where you have a lot of female coaches and a lot of female players. It's more the female sports, maybe. Without wanting to stereotype or whatever. So I think identification of these barriers is really important. Like, why does it not fit in within this sport? Why is it such a tradition that only male coaches are available or are actually working in practice? So I think that's first step. And then second is really important that that I think the clubs and the association. So it's not the responsibility of the female coaches or the girls participating within the sport that there is a low number of them. That's our common or a responsibility of the whole group, the whole system. So like the discussion that I had within my association, yeah, we would like to have a female coach, but they're not there. So yeah, so I need to hire a man. So that's more like an excuse. And I think if we really feel this responsibility together, we can make a change. But if it's like, okay, but the female coaches are not there and it's their responsibility to actually come up or whatever, and they don't do it, no, if we really do that together, I think then a change will be possible.
A question to you all: is there even a difference between men and female coaches? Because we started, of course, the conversation about competences that you have to have. Is there a difference?
For me, I think there's just a difference between people, between persons, and that's
and
way
numbers.
bigger than between gender. I don't. Yeah, from my experience, I don't see the a special difference between gender, but just between people.
I would 100% agree. So there are differences between male and female coaches, but only in the same way that there's differences between us four as female coaches sitting on this stage. There's differences between all the male coaches because, again, everyone's kind of individually different.
Yeah.
I think there's always this binary about men and women, but actually if you look among women and among men, there's just as much difference. So I think the answer is yes, there are, but there are also other differences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe to add to that, I think that's completely true, and I feel it actually as a person the same way. But what I also see that within the systems that we are working in, that there's still a sort of like stereotyping, which is kind of common, like this is really typical for a female coach or this is typically for a male coach. So we are still dealing with this kind of ideas. So I think it's important to acknowledge that and to see, okay, how can we actually deal with it? So for us, it might not be a problem, but I think that what happens within, and especially when it comes to the young female coaches that might be not so confident to actually start their career as a coach, I think it's really important to actually talk with them about it and to see and to value them really as a person and as a coach to become or remain in coaching as well. So although we might not feel it, I think still within the systems we need to see, do we really have an open and inclusive and a welcoming system for everyone? And that's not, of course, not only related to the female coaches, that's to all the groups that we have or whatever, or the groups that we don't have. But I think for now, if you really want to get more girls active as a coach, I think that's an important point as well.
Yeah, talking about getting more girls into coaching. Of course, in Holland we have a big icon at the moment named Sarina Wiegman at football. What can we learn from her? Or as a coach in general, of course, not only football, but yeah.
Again, I think the overwhelming thing I hear about her is her ability to relate to the players. And I think that's a lot of the thing that have come out, that the really successful kind of period that they're going through now is the players feel understood, they feel valued, they feel respected as people as well as players. And once you have that relationship, you can go with it. So I mean, that's what I'm taking from her. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah. In the media, there were some speculations that she can also take over, like the men's team. Do you think that's possible, Irene?
Well, I truly think that's the next step. In the NBA, you've had one female coach coaching a men's team. And I think Sarina Wiegman is one of the female coaches who is close to making that step if she wants it, when she wants it. Yeah, but I think really that's the next step. And hopefully the system will change, that men's team will benefit from that. Because I think once you have a balanced staff with male staff members, I think even a men's team can benefit from that.
Nice, nice. And at the start of a coaching career, it is of course important to have the right education. What kind of advice can we give to young coaches to start their education?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that what I've learned and seen in practice as well is that starting as a coach is like having a sort of love over being around the kids and really want to do something in practice. And then a lot of times people forget, like, okay, do I need an education actually to be a coach, or because I already have so much experiences as a player maybe, or whatever. And I think it's really important to do this kind of educations, to get your network, to be more reflective, to see what your competences are actually at, and to see, okay, what can I grab from that? But for the education, I think it's also really important to really relate to practice and not having like classrooms full of coaches, but having maybe the mentoring programs really at the micro level, at the playing field, to see how we can actually get the coaches on a higher level together.
So there we need a nice balance between education, so theory, and practice, like the mentoring part, what's happening on the field.
Yeah, and maybe even more holistic, like why is the theory in the classroom, why not on the field, why not where it actually happens. So I don't say that I have the solution to create it directly, but I think that would be really helpful. And one of my colleagues showed me this week a nice scientific article showing how coaches actually learn. And coaches have the attempt to actually grab something from it, like it's a shop. So I learned something from Sheila because I was with her at a training session, and I take something of the education, and I learned something now within this conversation, for example. So you can learn in a lot of ways, and I think that's specific for coaches, that they try to grab everywhere they actually can get some experience, and to build that frame within yourself and educate yourself actually.